Hello and welcome to Learning and Technology. My name's Frank and I'm glad that you're here. In this video, I want to talk about a question that I get a lot. Should I buy a new computer? A lot of students and a lot of people I speak with ask me this question when they're starting a new course of studies or a new project, a new career path. And they're curious about how much storage should they get? What type of processor should they get? How much RAM and memory should they get? Well, what if I told you that you don't really need to buy a new computer? That there is a way that you can get more processor, more storage, and more memory in a dynamic way by going to a cloud-based virtual machine, which is what this video is about. In this video, I'm going to go through some of the cloud concepts about how we can create a virtual machine in a cloud-based environment, and then we can adjust the resources of that machine as we need them. So if we need a more powerful computer, we'll go ahead and create a more powerful virtual machine. And if we need to dial it back because we're not using all those resources, we can dial it back. And that's going to affect how much it costs us every month as well. That computer that we run in the cloud can run at a fraction of the cost of buying a new computer. And we can even use our old computer or some inexpensive device like a Raspberry Pi, an iPad that we have, again, our old computer, to connect up to that machine. We also get the benefit of being able to connect up to that machine anywhere in the world. I can run that virtual machine in Europe and access it from North America, or I could run it in North America and access it from Europe. It's a very powerful way of working with computation, memory, and storage without having to go and purchase hardware for those things. It's pretty cool, pretty exciting, pretty cool, and I think you'll enjoy it. Let's go have a look, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this, and comment down below and share with colleagues. Let's go have a look at building a virtual machine in the cloud. Before we start building a virtual machine in the cloud, let's break down some of the components that are important to us so that we understand what's going on. So we have some sort of computer at home. Maybe it's a desktop, maybe it's a laptop, even something like an iPad or any of those devices. They're all computers. And they're really comprised of three components that the user cares about. The user cares about seeing what's on their screen, so they care about the video. They care about being able to input, so they care about the keyboard. Now, in the case of some devices, that's a touch screen, but they care about input to the machine. And they care about some way of pointing at things in a graphical user environment, so they care about the mouse. So we sometimes refer to this as keyboard, video, mouse. When we're working with a computer, those are the only ways that we interact with the computer as a general rule. We work with the keyboard, video, mouse to get information to and to receive information from the computer. Now, in terms of how good or the level of quality that we have, that's going to depend on the computer itself. That's going to depend on its ability to do computing. So the components of computing are the CPU, the central processing unit. The more powerful the central processing unit, the better we're going to be able to have processing occur. Then we also have our RAM, and that handles our memory. So more processing, more memory equals a better compute experience. Now there's more to it than that. Obviously the chipset on the motherboard is quite complex, but the point is we have a compute layer that handles the computations to give me fast processing so that when I put in keyboard input, I see on the screen, that takes very little processing. But if I do something like try to do some mathematical functions, then all of a sudden the processing matters. In fact, one of the things that a lot of people use computer for is playing video games. And when I'm dealing with video games, one of the key processing components are the graphics. So we might even have a special unit called a graphical processing unit. And we'll talk about that later as well. But the idea is that that can be an augmentation to the compute capabilities of your computer. Then we also have some sort of storage. So we might have a hard drive, or we might have a solid state drive. We could even have a USB drive or an SD drive that contains storage. And that is the storage component of my computer. So why am I breaking these apart? They're going to come into play when I go to build a virtual machine over here in the cloud. We also have something called the internet. And the internet obviously is very popular. Everybody uses the internet, and there's a lot of aspects to the internet, but for the purposes of what we're talking about here, all we care about is that the internet allows me to connect one computer to another computer far away, and that computer connects back to me from far away. And I'm passing information over and from that internet. So I'm passing a whole bunch of data to and from the internet. There's a lot of that, a lot of components to that, but the point is, the faster internet I have, the faster I can move data between those two endpoints. One of the very first things that we did when it came to working with cloud services is we took our hard drives. And what we did with the hard drive is we would go ahead and we would put that hard drive into a cloud service. We would take some of our storage. Now, quite some time ago, what we would do is we would actually buy an external hard drive, and we would attach that to our local computer through a USB key or through a USB port, and then we would have externally attached storage, which we could then use to back up our computer. We could use that to save family photos. If we were running out of space on the built-in hard drive, we would use an external hard drive to expand our storage capabilities. But soon, these cloud services came out and they said, well, don't do that. They said, if you have extra material that you can't store on your computer, we will give you storage over here that you can pay for, or we'll even give you some free storage in some cases, and we'll store it on our data center. And when you need it, just come through the internet, come pick it up and bring it back. And the cool thing about that is if I needed more storage, I could just buy more storage. And you might be familiar with that with services such as Dropbox, Google Drive, Microsoft OneDrive. They give us all of this storage in the cloud. And if you have a photo, for example, and it takes you, let's exaggerate, let's say it takes you a minute to transfer that photo to your computer screen, if you're saving money on storage, you might be acceptable. That's an acceptable period of time. We do this all the time. You're watching this video through the internet, so obviously, the internet is fast enough and good enough, and our computers are fast enough and good enough that it doesn't take so long that it's inconvenient. It's never going to be as fast as if it was locally attached, but it's fast enough to meet our needs. And that's storage in the cloud. Very early on, we did storage in the cloud. Now, we also have other components. We have this compute layer. Well, what if instead of just putting storage in the cloud, what if we went in and we also put our compute layer in the cloud? What if we went in and we took our processor and we took our memory and we put that in the cloud as well? That's a virtual machine in the cloud. And then what we could do is we could take this virtual machine, we could run it in the cloud instead of running it on our local computer, and all we need to do is pass the keyboard, video, mouse information to and from the cloud. So all we're doing is we're transferring through the internet the keyboard, video, mouse. I do all my compute, I do all of my storage in the cloud, and all I'm doing is bringing the keyboard, video, mouse connection between these two endpoints through the internet. And we can do that quite quickly. We can do that quite effectively. The one thing that we currently can't do super well is bring our GPUs through the cloud. Not that people aren't trying. So for example, there is a service by Google where they have a whole bunch of GPUs all stacked together in the cloud. And what they're doing is they're doing a bunch of processing for video game playing and trying to bring the keyboard, video, mouse onto a controller that connects to your TV. That's called Stadia. So, and you can read reviews on Stadia. I've used it. I've been a founding member of Stadia back when it first started, and I don't find it that bad at all. Some people say for extreme video game players, they're not going to do that yet. But imagine a world where I can run this machine in the cloud and just pass keyboard, video, mouse back and forth. And the very cool part about that is, let's say I have a really old computer. I still have a good keyboard, video, and mouse, but my computer's a little old, but it can still handle transferring data to and from the internet at a high speed. And all of a sudden I decide I need to do something really powerful on this computer. Some data analytics. So I need some more storage. No problem. Just allocate more storage in your cloud. I need more RAM. No problem. increase the amount of memory that you have in the cloud. I need more processing power. No problem. Just have more processing power. We can expand it and still just transfer the keyboard, video, mouse to our computer. That's pretty cool. Let's go and do that right now. Okay, let's build our computer out in the cloud. So I've gone to azure.com, which brings me to the Microsoft Azure website. And Azure has many compute and storage and all sorts of data services that I can purchase. So I'm going in and I've logged in with my account. You can sign up for a free account if you're a corporate client. And if you are a student, check to see whether your school has Azure for Education, because if they do, you can get a lot of free software and you can get a lot of free Azure credits in order to work with this service and learn it. So I've logged in. I'm just going to go to a tab where I've logged in, and I'm going to create a new resource. And the resource I want to create, you can see there's a lot of cool stuff I can do, but I want to create a compute resource. And specifically, I want to create a virtual machine. And when I create the virtual machine, I'm going to use my subscription. I need to create something called a resource group in order for this to work. And I'm going to call this Sky CPU. So this is Sky CPU, be the name of my resource group. And then I'm going to go in and the virtual machine will be named, I'll call it VM in the cloud. Clever name for it there. Now, I'm not going to go through every single option for creating a virtual machine, just enough so I can demonstrate it to you. There's a lot more to virtualization than I have time for in this video. In terms of the region, this is pretty cool. I can actually make this machine anywhere in the world. So I could be in, for example, well, I am in Canada, so I could make a computer in Canada. Or if I wanted to, I could make that computer in Europe. So I've done that before as well. And if you have a look, this is very important. It's going to say, okay, some availability options for there. But I want to go into my image here, and I want to choose Windows 10 Pro. And what's important here is when I choose Windows 10 Pro, notice that it will cost me $103 Canadian per month. But notice it's not available for this particular subscription. So if I go in, what I need to do is I can go in and see whether or not some other size is available in terms of the number of resources. And you'll see here that in my case, the Canadian East region on my particular subscription doesn't really support any of those virtual machines. Now, I went a little bit too far back here, so I'll go ahead and put in Sky CPU. I'm going to choose US West, which is close to me as well. So we're going to create a new one called Sky CPU. We'll say OK to that resource. We'll go ahead and call the virtual machine CPU in the cloud. And I'll take US West 2. I'm going to make this a Windows Pro. See if it's able to do that. If that size is available, it'll load the US price here. But I'm still getting, in this case here, there's the red flag on the size. So I'm going to go in here and see whether it'll grab that size. So it's going to cost me $106 a month Canadian. However, that may be acceptable, but I'm not going to run this machine 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's if I ran it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So let's go down here. The username, I'll use my name. And for my password, I'll put in a super secret password. Okay, so we put that in there, and then I'm going to go in, and now I need to allow access to this machine from outside on the internet. So I'm going to allow what's called the Remote Desktop Protocol, or port 3389, to come through my network. I'll still have to authenticate using this username and password, but this allows me to come in from the outside to get to this machine. I'll say that I'm eligible for the licensing. I am eligible for licensing. I'll go into my disks. I'm going to use a standard solid state drive, and I'll do encryption at rest. Again, this is just choosing my disk. I could also choose a premium solid state drive or a standard mechanical drive, but I'll just take the default. And now I'll go to networking. Underneath networking, What's really important here is that it's going to go in and it's going to give me some information about my networking, which I'll see after I create the machine as well. But for the most part, what I really care about here is that I have a public inbound RDP port. You can also do web or command line through Secure Shell, but I'm just going to do a remote desktop protocol. And I'll go into management. Again, underneath here, I have things like some security options. This is a very important one, the auto shutdown. Now, $106 is a lot of money for a machine if I'm not running it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So what happens is when I release compute resources back to Azure, when I'm not computing, I don't have to pay for those compute resources. So let's say, for example, I know that I study between 7 p.m. and 9 p.m. or whatever the case may be. I want to make sure that if I forget to turn off the machine, I can go in and I can have it automatically turned off for me at 9 p.m. at night. And that way, if I forget to turn it off, it'll automatically shut down. And before it shuts down, it'll send me a notification. So if I'm staying up a little bit later to study, it's not going to automatically shut down behind me. So I can go in here and I can go into advanced. And then underneath here, you can put some custom data in there as well. I'm not going to. I can put some tags if I have a lot of virtual machines, like for an IT department. But here I go, and I'm going to create this machine. And this is the really important part. I'm actually paying 15 cents per hour that I'm using this machine. So even though it came out at 106 or whatever it was dollars Canadian per month, that's if I'm running it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So here you can see I'm really only paying 16 cents per hour to use this machine. So if I use this hour, or if I use this machine, even if I used it for 10 hours a day, I'm paying somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.50 per day to use the machine. Obviously that can add up, but it's less than the price of coffee, as they say. So underneath here, I've got the machine. That's the validation process, and it's actually building that machine for me right now as soon as I hit create. So here we go. So the machine's being created, and you can see the deployment status up here. If I go here, it tells me how much credit I have remaining and the deployment's going and it's happening. And if I go back, if I also forgot to mention that 15 cents an hour was 15 cents Canadian. So that's only like half, no, it's about 10 cents US. You can see that it's creating all the resources here. I just pause the video while it creates them, and it takes a few moments to do that. Okay, so the resource is complete, and now I can go to the resource. I can even pin it to my dashboard. I'll do that as well. And that way, if I go to my dashboard, so if I go into, I can look at all resources here, but if I view my dashboard here, you can see that I've got CPU in the cloud. The virtual machine is pinned to there. So I'm going to click on that machine. And this is my machine running in the cloud. And this is the important part. I have a public IP address, and so this address will allow me to use RDP to connect to it. Now don't get excited, all you hackers out there. I'm going to be deleting this machine as soon as I'm done. So if I go here, I can actually take this address here, and I'll copy it. And I can now use remote desktop to connect to this machine and run it through the internet. So I've opened up the remote desktop connection that comes built into Windows, and I'll show you can also download it and install it on an iOS device, and you can even install a RDP client on a Raspberry Pi. But for now, I'll use Windows 10 running remote desktop, and I'll just put in the address here. So we go in there, and now remote desktop will launch. Notice it's asking me for my credentials, but that's actually not my name there. So we'll go in there, I'll go into more choices, and I'll use a different account. When I created this, I used my name and I used my super secret password. And I can even have it remember me. So now I'll say okay to that. And it gives me a certificate warning, but I'm okay with the certificate. I can view the certificate, install the certificate on my system for the local machine. That's just so I don't get prompted by that again. And we'll go ahead and just put that in. Okay, so we got that in there. And so we'll say yes here. And now I'll get my remote desktop. And here we are. You can see I've connected up to the IP address of my machine in the cloud. I get my first privacy settings. I'm just going to accept them. Again, I am doing some of these things a little bit quickly just because I want to demonstrate. So you'd read the dialog boxes, make sure that it's right for you. And here we are. I've got an entire machine in the cloud. And if I go in, I can go in and see that it's, it responds quite quickly. So if I go in here, I can go into, try something fun here, go into movies and TV. Underneath movies and TV, you can see I can go and log into my account. I can see some of the movies that are available to me. Now, one of the things is do not use this to build a virtual machine in a different region so that you can watch movies from a region that you're not entitled to. That's illegal. Don't do that. But you can go in here and you can do things like if I run the paint program, right? So I have the paint program in here. I can create some sort of new paint item. I'm not an artist, and you'll see that as evident. But you can see that's pretty quick. Like I don't get a lot of lag happening here. This is pretty quick based upon my skill set, my drawing there. So if I go in here, you can see it's a fairly fast and peppy environment for me. You can also see that the time is 11:31 p.m., which it currently is not. So I can go and change my date and time settings and such if I want to. I can even go in there, and if I have other software, I can install it. I'll do that right now. I've gone in and I downloaded the new version of Edge. I'm going to run a speed test. So just to show you here, if I run a speed test on this system, so I can do an internet speed test, let's see how fast this works. So you can see that I'm getting very fast internet speeds because I'm actually running this computer off of a data center out of the Western United States. So Microsoft's data center, surprise, surprise, has a pretty fast connection to the internet. So you can get some really good browsing here. Okay, so I'm on my iPad, so I'm going to go into Microsoft's RD client. So that's the remote desktop client. And you'll notice I'll have to add the machine. It gets a little bit tricky here. When I add the machine, I'm going to add the PC. And in terms of putting the IP address, that's the one that I showed you earlier when we connected up using Microsoft Remote Desktop. But when it comes to the iPad or this particular application, this is something that's a little bit weird, but you'll see it in a moment. So I put in the address. Hitting return won't do anything for me. If I hit the back arrow, it does populate that field. User account, I'm going to use that Frank account. I can put a friendly name in there if I want, but I'm not going to keep this. So you can see here that I've got all this information in here. I can share audio visual stuff back and forth, but I'm going to go ahead and save just so I can show you. It asks me for my password. I'm going to put in my super secret password. I think I may have just spelt it wrong. We'll find out in a moment. Nope, there we go. So you can see I'm now connected to my Windows machine in Azure using my iPad. But are we done? Nope, not yet. I've gone into my little Raspberry Pi here, into the internet, and I've opened up the Remina viewer, which is an RDP connection. I've put in the IP address for that particular server that we have. Let's connect up to it. It says, do you want to have the certificate? Yes, I'll accept the certificate. Put in my username. Put in my password. And I don't have a domain here. I won't save the password. We'll say OK. And right here on my Raspberry Pi, I am now running my Windows environment. Now my screen resolution is pretty low here, but you can see I've got my Windows environment in here. And of course, I could expand this out to fill up my Raspberry Pi screen. I'm using a very small monitor, just playing around with this. But the point here is that I have my remote connection. I can go into the Edge browser. I can do all sorts of fun things using my Raspberry Pi. Thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you'll like it and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this. Share it with colleagues that might benefit from this. Most of all, I hope you've learned something new and a way that you can get more computing power for lower cost by going to the cloud. Thank you again for watching. Here's some more videos on the channel.